roll the tape. Okay, I will call the April 5th, 2022 regular meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. How about Council?
To the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Naomi, roll call, please.
Mayor Holtzclaw,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vanel, Councilmember Bond.
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari,
Here.
Councilmember Steckler,
Here.
Councilmember Allison, Councilmember Duque.
The Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Allison, and Councilmember Duque all informed us they're on vacations this week with their families for break. So can we have a motion to excuse?
Motion to excuse. Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. We will begin as always with audience communication. Would anyone like to address the council this evening on an item on or not on the agenda? I see Ms. Heidel. There's no one in the audience here from the public today. So Barb, floor is yours. Name, address, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes if you would.
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast, Mill Creek. Good evening and thank you, Mayor. In spite of the overabundance of work, I wish to thank and compliment the Public Works Department for handling issues brought to their attention in an expedient way. I have informed Matthew, who's the manager, of potholes and graffiti and things that I observe on my walks. He has had his team take care of it swiftly. I appreciate this immensely and appreciate having such a good, hardworking Public Works Department. On another subject, I had hoped we would have an update on the progress of the search for a city manager tonight. One would hope the company has begun, even if it is laying the groundwork, the search. Has the job been posted? Has there been any interest, prospective respondents? Is the council getting weekly updates? As an interested resident, I'd appreciate frequent updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Anyone else like to address the council? Once, twice, 3 times. There'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting. With that, we'll move on to our presentations. The Acting City Manager, would you like to introduce representatives from Community Transit, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, we're proud to announce, and it's a pleasure to have the Community Transit team here. They'll be providing agency update on major project initiatives, 2024 network planning work and long-range plans as we prepare for the arrival of light rail into Snohomish County in 2024. Our presenters will be CEO Rick Ilgenfritz, Director of Planning and Development, Roland Behe. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for having us here this evening and for having us in a virtual format. It's great to be here. I see a few familiar faces out there. I'm excited to introduce myself to you in this capacity. I know I've worked with some of you in other capacities in transit in the past, but I'm Rick Ilgenfritz and I've been at CT now for about 15 months. And I got to say, it's pretty surreal to start a new job like this in the middle of a pandemic. But we have made it through, and hopefully we're on the cusp of the endemic phase. And we are still here and still providing service every day. In fact, we are proud of the fact that we didn't miss a single day of service since March of 2020 through to the present. So we're excited to be here and update you on what's cooking at Community Transit. We've got a number of key initiatives that I'll flag at the outset by way of introduction. And then Roland is going to walk us through the approach we're taking to restructure our bus network within Snohomish County for 2024, which is a public-facing system-wide planning effort in which we'd love to have the engagement of this council, your staff, and your citizens, as Mill Creek is at the heart of much of what's planned here as we look ahead to the opening of light rail in a couple of years. First and foremost, just to give you an update on where we are as an organization coming out of the pandemic, our service has continued throughout. As I said, we're maintaining about 82% of our pre-pandemic service. We are seeing ridership respond incrementally on a weekly basis. We bottomed out about 60% below our pre-pandemic ridership at the start of the pandemic, and it's been gradually coming back every bit since. Dropped again during the Delta and Omicron waves, but right now we're back up over 100,000 weekly boardings, and looks like we're going to continue that steady climb as employers welcome their employees back to the workplace, albeit in a slightly different way. There's going to be lessons learned, obviously, from this pandemic. One of them is going to be for transit. And what does the transit network of the future look like? How do people use transit in the future? And we're excited to be one of the organizations trying to figure that out. We are focusing on safety. We're continuing to enforce the federal mask mandate, although that is set to expire next in a couple of weeks. We have invested in state-of-the-art air purification technologies on our coaches and continue to provide the safest possible environment for the riding public. And when you wonder about what that means, it's the same basic technology that's in use aboard aircraft. We are working as well, as you know, on the Orange Line. In fact, we're going to break ground on the Orange Line in a couple of weeks, April 19th. Mayor Holtzclaw, we heard you're coming, and we hope you bring a crowd with you. We're excited to get that project started, get it built, and get it open in time for the Linwood Link opening in July of 2024. We will be hosting the FTA administrator. She's coming out to oversee and officiate the groundbreaking, and we expect to have a good turnout from our congressional delegation as well. Another area we're continuing to work as we emerge from the pandemic is service innovation. And that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but what it means to us is experimenting with different forms of transit to make it an easier, more convenient choice for people to use. We are about to launch a pilot project in the city of Linwood to experiment with on-demand transit, essentially having the ability to use your smartphone to summon a shuttle vehicle that is operating within a fixed area within the city that can then take you to the destination of your choice within the city, whether that's the Alderwood Mall, somewhere downtown, the transit center, Edmonds College. It's going to be an opportunity for us to test ways that we can expand transit to be easy to use for more citizens and hopefully augment overall the functionality of our transit network. We're going to be looking at scaling this pilot project into 2 to 3 additional locations over the next couple of years, and we think it really has promise as a potential new transit mode in Snohomish County. And Roland will touch a little bit more on that in his part of the presentation. In addition to that, we are in the midst of a zero emission fleet study. We operate a fleet of diesel buses. We have a few hybrid electrics as well in the Swift fleet. But we have taken the plunge into planning how we can begin to transition our fleet away from diesel and towards zero emission. So we have a study underway right now and are looking to draw some conclusions by the end of this year about how we want to see that work in Snohomish County. The opportunity is here with the federal government's action on the infrastructure package and the recent state package, Move Ahead Washington, for agencies like ours to move aggressively into that space. And the industry and the technology have caught up or are catching up with demand. So the opportunity is real. And then on top of that, we are starting to update our long-range plan. The regional growth and transportation plans are now aligned on the year 2050. And we are moving to update our long-range plan as well to correspond with that. So that we can vision, along with Mill Creek and other cities and the citizens of Snohomish County, how we can best show up to support the county's growth and its change in coming decades. But the main event is right upon us. Linwood Link is opening in just 2 years. And those of you who've been in public service know that 2 years can fly by in the wink of an eye. There is a lot of work between now and then to get ready. Part of that work is delivering the orange line, as I mentioned, to create that east-west connection directly to the light rail system. And part of that work is reimagining our network. So we have, for 4 decades, devoted about 30% of our service to serving downtown Seattle and the University of Washington. And we do that very well. It's a very popular service. It's well used. People like it. But Sound Transit is going to pick up that load with the Link Light Rail system. And that's going to improve travel time and reliability for everybody in that corridor. But it's going to give us at Community Transit really a once in a generation opportunity to think differently about our network and how we reinvest those resources we're using to serve downtown right now within Snohomish County to provide a more robust, more reliable network of connections within the communities and between communities. So we kicked that process off last year. We did an initial round of public engagement and got some feedback from most of the cities, about 1,000 responses to an online survey. We're just on the cusp of rolling out some network concepts that we're going to ask people to react to. And it's really going to be important because it shapes and will shape how we can leverage the regional investment in light rail to provide better connectivity at the local level within the county. So with that introduction, thank you for indulging the overview of what we're working on. I want to pass it off to Roland to get into the details of that network planning effort.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for having us tonight. I'm going to get into some more of the details of what Rick introduced in terms of the 2024 network restructure. And just as Rick began to outline, it's really hard to overstate the opportunity that we have with this connection to light rail in 2024. And I think probably many of you have had the experience of traveling to Seattle during peak commute periods over the past 20 years. And I think a defining characteristic of that trip is that it's variable. There's a lack of reliability in the I-5 corridor, and providing transportation in that corridor has always been subject to the whims of that traffic on a day-to-day basis. And just to underscore the opportunity that this connection to Link provides, we've all seen the construction moving its way north in the corridor. And it is completely grade separated from traffic. And, really the game changer is that once we connect customers to light rail at Linwood or Mount Lake Terrace, that trip is going to be consistent. It'll be frequent from Linwood to downtown Seattle, 28 minutes every day, every time. And that is really a much different experience than we've been able to provide consistently in the corridor. And as Rick said, it really allows us to leverage that investment and then push those resources out into all the communities that we serve throughout Snohomish County with a whole different level of mobility and also the opportunity to try some new things. So we're excited about the potential that this provides, and really looking forward to engaging a whole different constituency in Snohomish County who haven't been able to take advantage of transit in the past. So in terms of where we are, we've completed phase 1 of the process, and this really began as far back as 2020 with some of our early research and digging into the numbers and travel patterns within the county. Really ramped up last year in 2021, and in the closing phases of the year, we had an online open house and a survey. Our staff was out in direct engagement with City of Mill Creek and virtually every other jurisdiction in Snohomish County to talk to planning and public works staff about needs within the community. We engaged at the community level with organizations and interest groups to understand travel needs, and also, as Rick said, heard from nearly 1,000 members of the public in our online open house. So for the past several months, we've been processing that information and are now ready to move forward with phase 2 of the project, where we're actually presenting specific network concepts. This is all moving toward a decision point at the end of this year, where we will conduct a final public comment process and then ask our board to adopt the final network the fourth quarter of this year. And then that leaves us 2023 and the early part of 2024 for the implementation steps. So as with all major planning processes, we've started this process with some clearly articulated goals that you see here on the screen. The first and foremost was to provide that connection to light rail. This, as I said, allows us to leverage the Sound Transit investment and allows us to reinvest a lot of capacity throughout the county. The second is to expand access to frequent service. And the research has repeatedly shown us across the industry that really what attracts people to public transit and really opens it up to a whole new level of participation is a frequency that allows you to throw the schedule away. And that's what we've seen with the popularity of our Swift Bus Rapid Transit. That's what we've seen with other corridors where we're able to offer service that gets into that every 20-minute or particularly 15-minute or better level of frequency. You're never late for the bus, you're just a few minutes early for the next one. And that really provides that level of convenience that allows us to access a whole new market. We're also tracking the travel changes in our community. We have an opportunity with this connection to light rail and the level of reinvestment and expansion that we're able to undertake. We have the opportunity to serve areas we haven't served before. We also understand that our traditional market is changing. A lot of people are clearly working from home, and when they're coming back to the office, they're probably not coming back 5 days a week. They may be working 3 to 4 days a week, or even fewer days in the office. So we're tracking those changes. We're looking at the literature, and we're also surveying our customer base to understand how people's behavior is changing and how we can provide services that are most appropriate for them. And then finally, there's a big new emphasis on equitable access in terms of we're using a lot of research now to help us connect more effectively with those in the community who really depend on transit and are most vulnerable from a transportation perspective. And we're moving this part of the planning to the beginning of the process so that we can begin considering equity at the front end and ensuring that the system that we design really does ensure that travel is made easy for everybody. So in order to learn lessons toward this process, we connected first with light rail at Northgate back in October of last year when Sound Transit opened the Northgate Link extension. And this was really an opportunity to do a couple of things for community transit. It was the first real viable opportunity we had to provide a connection from Snohomish County to light rail. It was also an opportunity to learn some early lessons that we could apply to the Linwood experience coming up in 2024. And it allowed us to really provide options for customers during this interim period. So what Community Transit did was redirect our 800 series commuter buses, which had formerly served the University District in Seattle. And we redirected all of those routes to instead terminate at the Northgate Station in North Seattle, still providing great connectivity to the university campus for students with the station on either side of the university, but also opening up a whole host of new, really convenient travel opportunities. Northgate itself is a destination, as well as everything else along the line in terms of Capitol Hill, downtown Seattle, SeaTac, the Rainier Valley, et cetera. So really has opened up transportation from Snohomish County to King County, and not just during peak commute hours, but throughout the day and throughout the week with this connection. We've continued to operate our 400 series commuter routes directly to downtown during this period. And so really now commuters that are traveling to Seattle have an option to either do it with a single seat bus ride and take that traditional trip in the I-5 corridor, or they can take that bus connection to Northgate and get on light rail from Northgate to Point South. And this provides people with opportunity to mix their commute up and to try different alternatives. We've seen some of this in the data in terms of early returns. We know that some people will take a bus trip south in the morning and then will take a combination light rail and bus trip home in the afternoon. And it allows them to travel at times of day that they weren't previously able to on public transit. And also to test the reliability of the rail system on days when I-5 is congested. They can try the connection at Northgate and have a bypass around that congestion. So we're learning a lot, and we know that customers are enjoying the flexibility. A real cornerstone of our 2024 connection strategy is the continued expansion of frequent service, and particularly our Swift bus rapid transit network. This map shows the lines in our current build-out plan for Swift bus rapid transit. You can see the blue line in the middle of the map, which is the first line we launched in 2009 between Everett and Shoreline. And of course, you'll be familiar with the green line that we launched in 2019, which connects the Seaway Transit Center in Southwest Everett with the Canyon Park Growth Center in Bothell, but also runs right through the center of Mill Creek and really provided Mill Creek residents with a whole new level of connectivity to the transit system and to two of the biggest employment centers in the region. We are currently, as Rick noted, in the beginning stages of construction for the Swift Orange Line, with a groundbreaking plan later this month and then construction starting later in April. We'll talk more about that in a second. And then this also shows at the bottom of the map the planned extension of our blue line to the Northeast 185th station and North Shoreline for our second connection point to light rail. So we will have a connection to the Linwood Link extension, both at Linwood City Center Station and also at the 185th North Shoreline Station. So the beginning of a really robust connection between those two high capacity transit systems with the regional light rail system, as well as community transit Swift network. In addition to the Swift lines you see on the map, we will also have other frequent services that we will be providing in the 2024 network. And we plan to continue increasing frequency as through the light rail connection in 2024 and then in the years following, as we continue to see demand increasing on the system, continuing to invest in frequency on our major arterial corridors. So just specifically about the Orange Line project, you can see the project map here, and it shows that connection from McCollum Park on the east side or the right-hand side of the through Mill Creek, paralleling the green line, but then turning the corner at Mill Creek Town Center on 164th Street and going up the hill, and then connection with Ashway Park and Ride, Swamp Creek Park and Ride, south through Linwood around the Alderwood Mall, and then providing that connection to Linwood Link at Linwood City Center Station. And then finally continuing on across for a connection with the Blue Line, and then finally terminating at a new transit center that we will build at Edmonds College. So the project includes 15 new buses, new transit center at Edmonds College, a rebuilt and redesigned transit center at McCollum Park and Ride, 19 new station platforms throughout the corridor, and some speed and reliability infrastructure constructed at some of the significant intersections along the line. So we're really excited about this. It's going to be a robust east-west connection, providing that now a more complete network with the Blue Line and the Green Line to provide a really compelling high-capacity transit network in South Snohomish County, and including in the Mill Creek corridor. And the level of service on Highway 527 is truly going to be phenomenal, with frequent service connections on the Green Line to Canyon Park and the regional services on I-405. Connections to the job center up in Southwest Everett, and then frequent connections to light rail in Linwood. So really Mill Creek sitting in the center of that high capacity transit network with really great connections from a transportation perspective to nearly everywhere. Rick talked about some of the new service options that we are envisioning, and as we said, the Linwood pilot project is going to start in the next few months with our first experiment in some on-demand shuttle services that you're able to summon both with your mobile phone as well as with a traditional phone call. And we're excited about the opportunity this provides to really fill some of the gaps that have been tough to provide with traditional fixed route transit. and also that we can provide at different times of day. And so it's really, the opportunity to extend our network, to provide a whole different level of convenience for customers, to bring them either into the central system and provide connectivity to the high capacity transit projects that we're operating or planning in the future, or to provide their complete trip for more local mobility within cities like Linwood. And as Rick said, we're excited about expanding this program to other cities in the service area, and I'm sure we'll be talking more with cities like Mill Creek about applications locally where it makes sense to supplement and extend the reach of our traditional services. I mentioned equity earlier, and as I said, equity's really been playing a prominent role in our 2024 planning work. We're using this in conjunction with the traditional data points like population density, employment density, and ridership productivity on existing services. And we've built this model on some best practices that have come out of King County. We're looking at the low income data and using that 200% of federal poverty line as a standard to help establish that, which is the same standard that applies to the Orca Lift low income fare ticket product. We're looking at foreign born populations, communities of color, limited English speaking households, populations living with a disability, and also a population that does not have access to automobiles. So really looking at this, letting some of this data drive some of our early concepts in terms of the service planning work, and ensuring that the network that we design provides the most equitable coverage that we can for all of Snohomish County. In terms of our outreach process, as we said, the survey that was running back in November and December received nearly 1,000 responses. We got out not just with our local jurisdictional partners, but also out into some of the community-based organizations, and had more than 25 in-person outreach events. We had some live virtual sessions and lots of different opportunities for people to engage and provide comments. And we provided that in multiple languages, and have really seen a higher level of engagement than we have in past efforts. So we're thinking this is a step in the right direction, and you'll continue to see this emphasized in our planning and outreach processes. In terms of the specific feedback that we heard during this first phase of the outreach, these are some examples of responses. We had a preference for more neighborhood services, getting out into the areas where it's been more difficult to serve with traditional bus service in the past, or where we haven't been able to provide the frequency of service perhaps that was at a level of convenience that would be appealing to customers. So more neighborhood service to local destinations in Snohomish County. There were still significant emphasis as well on connections to Seattle and the East Side, and that has helped to inform some of the service designs that you'll see in the next month. Somewhat a preference leaning toward weekday service, but also on weekdays a preference for more midday service rather than focusing so much on the peak commute hours, and that is really matches up with our observations on the commute market, where people are traveling at different times of day now, and much more of community transit's ridership now has become focused on essential workers and those that are really traveling for all of their daily needs rather than just work trips. Really a big focus on convenience and ease of use of transit, and a focus more inward within Snohomish County rather than so much on the inter-county trips. And so that's helping to inform the network designs that we'll be sharing later in the process. And just speaking for a moment specifically about Mill Creek's needs, one thing that you'll see in the coming phase is a focus on strong east-west connectivity from Mill Creek to destinations like Linwood City Center Station. And we already talked about the Orange Line, providing that really compelling every 10 minutes a bus traveling down Highway 527 and turning the corner up to the station in Linwood. So having access to really to light rail all day and all week, both to get you there and also to get you home when you come back. We've also got some new east-west connections that you will see across the top of the city on the 132nd and 128th Street corridors, with some new express commuter routes that also provide a direct connect to Linwood City Center Station. So several ways to get there depending on where you live in the Mill Creek area. Just outside the city, we plan to provide service on North Road between 164th Street and the Filbert Road or SR 524 corridor. So we'll see service, for example, for the first time to Linwood High School in that area. And we're also providing more connections north and south between Mill Creek, and particularly the east side of Mill Creek over in the 35th Street area, south into the Canyon Park area for connections with regional services in the I-405 corridor. And as I also mentioned, I think there's opportunity to talk about partnering with the city on some of the innovative service programs that we talked about earlier as well, in some areas of the city where it's been harder to plan for fixed route bus transit. So lots of opportunity in the coming phase, and we really want to encourage the city's engagement in that process. This slide shows the schedule that we're currently on. As we talked about, we were in the detailed service design process in the period of the first 3 months of this year. We're just beginning the partner agency outreach this month. And so we'll start to engage again with our city and county and state agency partners. The launch of the online open house and the more public facing phase of external outreach will happen in May. And then that will, once we gather that input, that will inform the final service design phase, which will happen over the summer months. And as I shared earlier, we'll have a final public review phase in the fall, and the current target for our board adopting the 2024 network is December 1st of this year, with implementation to follow. And right now we're targeting mid-2024 with the July launch of Link Light Rail for our implementation date. So there's a few steps yet to come, but we're really looking forward to this next phase of outreach and engaging with both the staff at Mill Creek as well as the community in general. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rick.
Well, thank you, Roland. I don't think there's much more to add. We're at an interesting time for the transit industry. I'm sure you as leaders at the municipal level are experiencing similar things as we try to figure out what the new normal is coming out of a pandemic. Things will change. I think we could probably all agree we're not going back to the way things were in 2019. Employers are going to do things differently. Job seekers and employees are going to do things differently. It's on us as an organization serving the public to take that spirit of innovation and take it forward and figure out how we can best serve the community's needs as they evolve. So that's a challenge that we relish taking on while we stay focused every day on keeping that service out there reliably and predictably and dependably for your constituents. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much. We'll turn the floor back.
Thank you, Rick and Roland. Are there questions? I know I have some, but I'll get to others first.
I have a comment, not a question. So if you want to go first, I'll go.
I have comments that'll lead to a question. So go ahead, Councilmember Stecker.
Well, first of all, Rick, Roland, this is John Stecker. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just want to make a couple of comments. That having moved up to the north end about over 40 years ago, I've seen a lot of growth up here. And we've talked a lot about population growth and how it's affecting us from a housing situation. We sometimes don't get a chance to really speak as to how much congestion we're going to be seeing also in gridlock and other cases, and how difficult it is just to get around. And what you're doing and what we're now starting to see is very encouraging. It's exciting. I know for a lot of people, just seeing the money we're spending on community transit, we're starting to see it come to fruition. We're starting to see what it can do. I just want to share one thing with you and with the media. Hopefully we'll promote this. It's on the call today. A friend of mine and I were talking about the light rail, and we were kind of curious as to where that thing goes from Northgate and all that. And so we decided to shut up and just get on the light rail one day. And we rode it from Northgate to SeaTac to every stop in between. And it was the most eye-opening experience of my life because I got to see all the stops where it went. I got to see that I could get a better parking spot at Benaroya Hall by taking the light rail than I could on myself. It opened myself up to ideas of going to Pike Place Market, 2 blocks away from Fifth Avenue, Pioneer Square. The list goes on and on. Every sporting event. It was amazing how much it made this megatropolis get a little bit smaller. But I encourage people if there's anything you can do, and from your outreach program, getting people to ride the rail for the first time is probably the very single best thing you can do to really encourage people not only to promote light rail, but then to also find those outreach extensions. What green line, red line, blue line is going to get me over to the rail. So from my front door, I can go anywhere I want. I sum that up by saying I have a 26-year-old son who is extremely successful in business, but has a goal. He's never bought a car. He's never owned a car. He doesn't want to own a car. He wants to see if he can get by with community transit. And it has been a hellacious time for him, except for now it's starting to get easier and easier and easier. So I know you've got one strong fan. I think there's a market out there of young people, a market out there of the income level you spoke of, and a market level of people like myself that have a car, got my own car, can use my own car, but doggone it, this is actually a little bit better than my own car. So I think there's some great things in the future. And I just you got me very excited listening to your presentation. Thank you for all the hard work. It's hard to vision the future, but you're making it happen. So thank you.
Time out.
Thank you.
I got booted.
Thank you.
Oh,
Trying to read.
I ran out the mayor. I ran out his computer.
I gotta find a way to reconnect. There. I got kicked off.
Well, I'll just make an observation while we're waiting for the mayor, if it's okay. I appreciate the comments. And, one of the things we did during the run up to the opening of the Northgate system was we deployed ambassadors out to park and rides and transit centers to interact directly with customers and tell them how the system was going to change and show them how to use the light rail system. And we did a series of YouTube videos where we planned trips and did the itineraries and posted those videos to YouTube so people could see for themselves. I suspect, with the speed of technology changing, we'll probably have to switch to TikTok for Linwood. But anyway, we're gonna do everything we can to help people make that choice to jump on the train, jump on the bus, make their daily commute, their trips work that easily.
It's coming back. It prompted me to
Just for fun, anybody out there who's never ridden the light rail, go ride it. Go ride it when you don't have to. Don't have to go anywhere. Just ride it to see all the different destinations. It's very relaxing. It's a real eye opener too, because you don't have to be anywhere. You just get to look at places around here that you've never even seen before, I'm sure. Some of the stops are amazing. So I'll tell you about the first stop. No, I'm okay.
Okay, am I back? Naomi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you again, Rick and Roland, for the presentation. And I look forward to joining you on the 19th in Linwood. I got a couple comments that will lead to a question. Roland, you made the comment that the key is frequency. I would argue the key is frequency and convenience. My wife rides community transit from McCollum Park down to downtown Seattle for her job at Harborview several times a week. When we moved to Mill Creek 19 years ago, my office was on the Edmonds waterfront. I could walk to the end of my block, hop on a 115 and have it drop me literally next door to my office. But what was a 30-minute drive would be an hour and 5 minutes per the scheduled bus ride. So you can see where my decision-making on that landed. But when light rail gets extended past 44th and we start getting up into Everett, one of the challenges that we have for our community is, the Ashway Park and Ride is very successful, but it has a reputation. If you're not there early, you're SOL. So there's more people that would use community transit if there was a multi-level parking structure like there is in Montlake Terrace or elsewhere. So I was a little surprised when I found out through the station planning a couple of years ago for the light rail station at Ash Way that they're not planning to add any more parking to that location when light rail gets up here. And with the orange line, they expect people from Mill Creek to take the orange line to get out there, which is great. But my question goes back to convenience. How are we going to get, or how is community transit going to get people to the orange line from our neighborhoods in Linwood without having people come down and inundate our commercial center and taking up the parking for our businesses down there?
Yeah, I can respond to that. It's a great question. And I think I'll just say that I think the vision, rather than parking structures at the light rail stations, and there will be some measure of parking expansion at some of the stations, but I think the real key is frequent feeder service from the surrounding areas. And that's really the vision for Swift, is that Swift provides that convenience across the Southwest County area for, a bus every 10 minutes from so many places that will feed into those stations. And we'll see the first taste of that with Linwood Link, but then so much more with Everett Link, as you described, where we're also connecting at places like Ash Way and Mariner. I think the answer to the question about how are we going to get people to that Swift high capacity transit system from the surrounding neighborhoods, one of the solutions I think that we see having tremendous potential is what we talked about in terms of on-demand shuttles, where we actually go and collect people where they live and bring them on their schedule, really on a schedule that makes sense to them in terms of, I'm ready to travel now, I'm going to hail that ride, and have it come within a reasonable period of time, so that they're not they don't need to plan their life around the transit schedule. They can plan their life around the convenience of that on-demand travel. And so that's some of the vision that we really see the potential for this new mode that we intend to develop, is that ability to complement things like Swift Green Line, Swift Blue Line, and Link Light Rail, and really provide that convenience, not just once you're on the high capacity transit system and you've got that frequency at your disposal, but really all the way from your front door when you're boarding that first leg of the trip to get you down into the primary system. So I think we're also, going to be focusing on frequent bus feeder service where that makes sense as well. But we really see, I think we see potential for a multitude of solutions now, and that's really this 2024 potential or our opportunity that we have is really to do that reinvestment that we've talked about, and really, have that rising tide of transit across the communities that we serve in Snohomish County. So we'll see the beginning of that in 2024, and there's a lot of potential for continued growth and expansion beyond that.
Thanks. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen. Great proposal. A lot of information there. I have a couple of questions. First one I want to ask is, I think we can all agree that nothing can really work if the community isn't safe as a whole. I've noticed an uptick, and not just exclusive to here, of crime on public transportation. So, and this isn't exclusive to Washington, it's across the country. So what steps are you folks taking to make sure that ridership is safe, that shuttling people around the communities is going to be a safe endeavor? And can we reassure them that, when they hop on these vessels, moving them around, that it's probably going to be a lot safer than getting in a car?
I'll take that one. Thanks, council member, and I appreciate your perspective you bring to this as a member of law enforcement, former member of law enforcement. I appreciate your service and your sort of inside knowledge of how these systems work, and your observation that this is broader than just one transit property or transit in general. But you're right. I kind of have a saying I like to use, which is a safe system is a busy system. The more people you have using the system, the less bad activity you tend to see. And because of the pandemic, and because, about half our ridership receded and is trickling back slowly, there's fewer people, there's fewer eyes, there's less crowding. So there's more room for bad activity to take place. And we've seen it tick up. So we spent a huge amount of time the last 2 years making sure we were doing everything we could to keep people safe from the virus. And while we were focused on that, we saw this uptick in other bad behavior. So we have taken some steps. I guess I'd categorize it in two buckets. We have a series of interim actions that we're undertaking here starting last month, and then some longer term strategies that we're baking into our safety and security plan. But basically what we're doing is we've done an intensive data collection effort to try to define the problem, where it is, when it's happening. And we are starting to surge our resources into those times and those places. I want to emphasize with the council and with the public who's following along at home that the system is overwhelmingly safe. We operate 49 routes out there, and we're seeing the activity predominantly in 2 routes, in the Swift Green and Blue line over at the Airport Road and Evergreen Way junction. And I think we're probably all pretty familiar with that junction. There's stations on all 4 corners, and there's stations up and down both lines. And that's where we tend to see that activity. So our past practice up until recently had been that we reduce staffing after the evening rush hour. So we send our fare ambassadors home and we reduce our supervisor presence out there. And what we're doing instead is we're bringing those resources to the table and focusing them in that area all the way till midnight, till the end of the service day. And we're trying that on a trial basis, just started it 2 weeks ago. So we're seeing some preliminary results. Obviously the customers and the employees, coach operators, getting a lot of positive feedback. That onboard presence is deterring activity on board. We're having our transit police deputies focus on the stations and not the coaches. So we're deploying our resources in a balanced way, but they're close enough that they can respond pretty quickly. So this is in the vein of experimentation to try to shift the conditions out there in the field. It appears preliminarily to be working, but to sustain it's going to require some resource commitment.
Thank you. That is probably the most candid and upfront answer I have probably had in this dais in years. Thank you so much for that, Thomas. Second question is the pilot program that you have in Linwood. What does that mechanism look like? I saw the pictures up here. So someone who is disabled and home can now get picked up or dropped off from the bus, and that's how is that paid for, and how does that work?
Yeah, Roland, you want to take that one?
Sure. It is a pilot. It'll be a 12-month engagement. We're in the procurement process right now. And so the intent will be to award a contract to a provider who is using a smaller vehicle. That vehicle will be hailed with an online app. So you'll be able to use your smartphone, for example, to summon the service. It'll operate in a defined zone within Linwood, and this has been conceptually identified to this point. It'll be something that we refine as we get into the pilot process, but it generally encompasses an area that includes Alderwood Mall, extending west to include the Civic Campus for Linwood along 44th, and then extending south to include the Linwood City Center Station and the current transit center. So within that rough area, there would be a circulation by a small number of these vehicles, and they would essentially be striving to be picking people up that within a very short period of time. We're envisioning a wait that is 15 minutes or less to be able to be picked up and then delivered to a destination within that zone. The idea is that there would be efficiencies with grouping people together that are traveling along at a similar time to similar destinations along that path. But the idea is to provide enough coverage so that the wait time is consistently short and the trip is consistently convenient. So some of these will be point-to-point trips within that zone. For example, maybe somebody going from their residence to do some shopping at the mall and then go back. Some of them will be a feeder trip to other transit services. For example, carrying people either to a route that's in the area or directly into the transit center for a connection with another service, and specifically light rail as an alternative there. So that's the general operating concept. We're going to learn a lot in that 12-month period, and then we'll make decisions about what the long-term plan is for that kind of service.
I really like that. And to me, I think those that may be disabled or less opportunistic to utilize public transportation, it's usually simply because they can't get there. And the fact that you're doing a degree of outreach like this, I really like this part. Great presentation. Thank you so much for that. And I'd like to come back and hear it updated, see how this goes.
Other questions, comments? Councilmember Bond.
I don't know if the light thing's working. I tried to turn it on. Thank you, Mayor.
Now it is.
All right.
Wasn't turned on my end.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I appreciate it. I'm going to just sort of plead my case to you to take before CT leadership. It's a statement that I've made before, but everybody that rides the bus, every ride is subsidized to a certain degree. The more people that ride, the better the return on that subsidy to the taxpayers. And I would like to see free bus service. You know, I was one of your original CT deputies. I was there for 10 years. I've been out for 8, so things have changed. But the idea that a person, maybe a young person, sits on the bus, doesn't pay their fare. The person sitting next to him does pay the $2, and one's a criminal and now is in a negative interaction with the law enforcement or the coach operator or the fare ambassador, and the one sitting right next to him who's getting subsidized for some amount, but just not as much, it's rough. I always kind of struggled with that. It also, you talked about marginalized communities. This sort of puts some of those folks into a conflict with law enforcement who's trying to, quote, have everybody play by the rules. And also, I know that CT spends a significant amount of money to collect the money, right? So you got your Orca cards, you've got your boxes, you've got cash machines that collect. I mean, all the dollars we're spending to collect the nickels. I'm not sure it pencils. I know there's a philosophy in the transit world that, well, if they pay something, even if it's just a small amount, they somehow respect the system better. But I would love to see it be free, at least for students or disabled folks or elderly. Start with some of the obvious softballs and give these people a chance to ride for free. We're already subsidizing anyway, whether they pay the reduced fare or the full fare or whatever. Have the transit deputies and the fare ambassadors not worry about holding somebody who maybe doesn't have $2 and is trying to get to work to earn $2. Have them just focus on the safety. Mm-hmm. And also this goes to your operator safety, because the bulk of the negative interactions and assaults on coach operators were a result of fare disputes. So just get that out of the mix, let the folks ride, and just say, look, do the right thing. Sit there, be polite, don't touch the lady next to you, don't urinate, don't light the bus on fire, keep your clothes on, no drugs or alcohol, and you'll get to ride the bus for free. But if you don't do those things, start running up and down the halls naked, then we're going to have the transit cops talk to you, and we're going to take some action. You're not going to be allowed to ride anymore. So I that's my little daydream. And my thought is, if we ever did that, we would see a big bump in ridership. And even though we're collecting a little less, the overall subsidy by the taxpayer might actually be reduced. I'm not a transit expert, so I get that there may be some flaws there, but the bottom line is we subsidize it anyway. And I just would love to see less conflict there, and folks that need to ride the bus and maybe can't afford it would just be able to have that free ride.
Thank you, Councilmember Bond. Anyone else?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Were you going to make a comment?
I wasn't sure if that was a question or a comment. I would observe one thing. You may not be an expert, but you clearly know a thing or two. You may be in luck. The legislature just passed this transportation funding package called Move Ahead Washington, and it has some significant new funding for transit, and it has one key string attached, which is that youth be permitted to ride for free. So Senator Leas and Representative Fye from Tacoma spearheaded this. And if we want to qualify for state transit support grants starting in the next biennium, we need to review and update our fare policy to allow kids 18 and younger, essentially young adults, 18-year-olds and below, to ride the system for free. So we're about to embark on a pretty significant social experiment to see how that will work. And I think, speaking more philosophically, as we look ahead to the future of transit, we really need to challenge ourselves to think about how we can best incentivize people, as many people as possible, to make this choice to help our overall transportation system work. So I appreciate the spirit in which the comments are offered, and we're going to be working on at least that youth part of it here this summer.
Thank you again, gentlemen. I look forward to seeing you in person 2 weeks from today.
Great.
Thank you.
again.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, we are on to our first item of new business. I'll turn it over to the Finance Director for item D.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm covering a resolution that is needed to approve an amendment to the city's labor relations agreement. So the city is required by law to negotiate in good faith in regard to labor management issues and labor contracts with bargaining units of city employees. So right now, our labor relations consultant advises the city on labor policy, reviews and suggests labor contract language, performs total compensation studies, and then represents the city in labor negotiations, mediation, PERC, and arbitration proceedings. So Cabot Dow Associates has been providing labor relations services since August of 2020. That is under this current contract, and it did start with a maximum cost of $25,000. In 2021, the agreement was amended to a maximum cost of $50,000 so that Cabot Dow Associates could assist the city with all of the continued negotiations between AFSCME and the Guild. So we're moving into our third year of negotiations with the city's unions, and we are quickly approaching our maximum agreement cost. So staff is requesting an approval of an agreement amendment to increase that maximum cost to $75,000. So this is the third year, and this is just going to be for continued labor relations services through 2022 as the city and the Guild continue negotiations over the successor collective bargaining agreement and as we work through potential mediation proceedings. Does anyone have any questions?
Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. No, I do not have a question, but just a quick comment. I have known and worked across the table and on the same side of the table as Cabot Dow and Associates, and know them to be a very reputable organization, steeped in knowledge in this field, and I fully support this resolution, and I'm happy to make it.
Is that a motion, Councilmember Cavallari?
Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve the resolution amending the service agreement between Cabot Dow and Associates in the city of Mill Creek.
I had a question.
Let's have a second and then you can ask a question. Councilmember Cavallari, you have a question? Sorry, Councilmember Steckler.
I'm sorry,
Laurel.
who second did?
Councilmember Bond made the second.
Okay, thank you.
Laurel, I just had a quick question. So I understand that we increased from 25 to 50 to assist with the AFSCME and Guild. What drove the cost increase from 50 to 75?
So this has been since 2020. So it was with AFSCME in the beginning. We had the Guild. Oh, everyone's frozen. So we also had the Guild. We've been doing this for quite a while. We had an MOU that extended the Guild contract for a year. And now that we finished with AFSCME, we do still have the Guild to get through. I don't know that we'll need the full $75,000, but we just didn't want to have to keep coming back if we just increased it by about 10,000.
So the 50,000 in 21 was just for ASME, and now
It was ASME and the Guild.
and the Guild.
Yes.
And now in 22, it's going to be ASME and the Guild again. But the concern is that it's probably going to go high. I'm just curious as to what's causing the cost increase.
Yes. So at this point in time, the reason we need to increase the maximum cost is because we did just finish with AFSME. So we were still paying on with this $50,000. We did pay AFSME, and we are still continuing with the Guild. So we've been paying for AFSME and the Guild every year. And so now we're just down to the Guild, but we don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know if we're going to be going to get mediation, if we're going to be going beyond that. This is just in preparation for what could happen.
So the answer is the ASME costs have already taken us up to the 50,000, and we're still not done with the Guild. Got it.
Correct.
Okay,
We're at the cap.
got it. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? So Naomi, am I correct? This is resolution number 2022-639.
That's correct.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The resolution is approved 4-0. That brings us to an excavator. Item E, Mr. Combs. Or is
Thank
it
you.
Director Todd?
Yeah, thank you. I'll say a few words while Matthew's getting set up. We're going
Okay.
to try this a little different. He's bringing his computer in and we'll see if that works for everyone. Little history. You may remember we talked about the famous $230,000 that was in our budget this year from the equipment replacement fund. And that was replacing the two old Isuzu trucks that have lived a full life, full and generous life. And one of them has been retired. We still have one of them here. But instead of just replacing those like for like, we've been taking a thoughtful approach to what do we want to do, not just two more trucks. We came to you last year, bought a new truck, bought some switch and go accessories to go with that. Matthew's got some pictures tonight. We continue to look at how we're doing things. How much do we do? How much do we self-perform ourselves versus how much we out? So we've done some experimenting and some thinking this year. Matthew's done some great stuff with his staff to say, how do we match the skills of our staff and the equipment we own with the needs of the city? And so that's what we're talking about tonight, is a more thoughtful approach to how we do this. We are going to run over that 230, but I assure you that we have saved enough money by not contracting out for some things like pothole repair, that we've got enough money in our budget. So Laurel said we've got enough to spend here. So the ask tonight plus the 112 we spent before is going to be more than the 230, but we've got that 230 from the equipment replacement fund plus enough money in a regular budget. So we're not asking for a budget amendment. We're asking you for permission to go ahead and buy some equipment. With that, I'm going to turn it to Matthew, who's got the fun pictures and the exciting words. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you, Director Todd. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you know, my name is Matthew Combs. I'm the city's supervisor for public works, and I'm before you today to request the approval of funding for us to purchase a mini excavator for our department. So what we're talking about is this John Deere 50 mini excavator. It's $153,000, including the attachments and trailers per trailer. This is a necessary piece of equipment as our infrastructure is aging. We need to be able to keep up with that. Our maintenance versus repair ratio has changed significantly over the almost 4 decades. We're not dealing with just inflicted wounds such as cars running into ditches or taking out streetlights. We're also looking at the more natural things like potholes, sinkholes, tree root issues, things like that. We're no longer just cutting the grass and cleaning parks is the main point. When we talk about labor and efficiency, this is by no means an exhaustive list of the things that Public Works does. Rather, this is more of an example of some of the more common tasks that require a substantial amount of manpower. Just to highlight a few, I wanted to point out asphalt repair and patching along with sidewalk maintenance. When you're manually loading chunks of asphalt and sidewalk concrete into trailers and doing those types of works manually, it is rather labor intensive and time consuming being one of the biggest factors. Right-of-way mowing, ditch maintenance, things like 9th Avenue, the blackberries along Highway 527. Blackberries we know are an invasive species. We need to make sure that those we keep those knocked back. Pathway and gravel maintenance, not only the boardwalk on 9th Avenue, but we look at the gravel pathway around Heron Park. Is that me? Look at the gravel pathway around Heron Park. Every so many years, that thing needs to be refreshed, graded, and it's rather time consuming to bring in wheelbarrows and shovels just to do some gravel spreading. Looking at rentals and contractors, you'll see some of the things we did carry over from the previous list, and that's because we've done it both ways. We did it both ways as kind of the main driver behind deciding what piece of equipment would best suit the city. Not looking, or our goal is not to entirely eliminate contractors altogether, but we need to be able to take care of the things that a city our size reasonably should be able to do ourselves. Well, we can't get away from contractors altogether. I'll give you an example. The streetlight on 527, regardless of the cost of it, we didn't have the manpower, the expertise, or the equipment to do any of that type of stuff. Those are pretty specialized things, and we intend to keep using contractors for those. There are limits that are set forth by the state too, as guidelines, you know, dollar thresholds. If we go above, I think it's $30,000. If we go beyond $30,000, that needs to be contracted anyway. Considerations, things that we take into consideration when a repair or a maintenance item presents itself. Is this something that we can do manually? Will we need to rent equipment, or would it be better just to hire out a contractor? We look at the availability, not just the availability of contractors. There's not a bunch just sitting on a bench waiting for Mill Creek to call them up and have them come work for us. But we also look at the availability of equipment. A good example would be during the winter. The whole reason we rented a backhoe this year for 2.5 months was for the mere fact that when snow's in the forecast, every other, whether it's a municipality or agency around us, is doing the same thing we are. They're trying to find ways to either load their sanders or move snow. Yes. It was $5 grand. I was going to cover that here.
Next slide.
A couple of slides. Appreciate the question though. We look at time. The clock starts when a repair or maintenance is identified needing to be done. If we're going to hire a contractor to do that, that means we need to figure out the scope. Hopefully it's not a sinkhole, because there's a lot of unknowns that go into that. We develop the RFP. We need to request proposals. We need to tell the contractors, hey, we have this issue. We need you guys to propose a way to fix it. We give them a couple of weeks, maybe a month to draft their proposals and come up with a plan and feed it back to us. Maybe a day or two to review those and pick the best proposal. Then we go through the approval process. You guys are familiar with that. Sometimes you're included. Once we get through the approval process, a contract can be drawn. Once it's executed, then we go back to contractor availability. Quality control, particularly quality control, I'll frame it this way. When we do the work, we own the work. When a contractor does the work, we get the opportunity for inspections at various points, but for the most part, we're relying on the contractor to do everything right. And then we get down to cost, everybody's favorite. What does it cost? I'll give you a few examples. We looked at the crew time, the equipment, the materials, the engineering or consultation needed to perform some of these repairs. I reached out to a few of the local contractors around, and they gave me some estimates. The Nickel Creek sinkhole, kind of a weird one. I happened to be on site during that repair, so I knew what went into it. When I was quoted at $12,000 to $18,000, depending on what contractor you talk to, that really $18,000 could have been on the low side. The sinkhole that was up in Evergreen, more of a dip. We saw cut that out, remove the asphalt, and then have a contractor do the same, excavate the top layer of material, and then including repaving and sealing that patch. Came out to about $6,800 to $7,500, depending on the contractor. The Highlands Park path repair. Some of you may know, some of you don't. We went out, we had a rented mini excavator, went out around Highlands Park, saw cut all the trip hazards out, removed the roots, paved it back over. A contractor to do that job would have been about $8,000. That was three days, one piece of equipment, a mini excavator, and 2 crew members. To put this in context, we did the Nickel Creek sinkhole start to finish for $5,200. the Evergreen sinkhole, including the CDF, the controlled density fill, which was not included in any of the other assumed costs, came out to about $5,000. The Highlands Park path repair, we did that for $4,300. I have another example of that same type of repair all the way from City Hall South all the way down to Pond 6. We were able to rein that in for about $1,800 doing it ourselves, including the rental. Speaking of rental equipment, for the last almost a year and a half, we spent north of $20,000 just on rentals. That $5,000 backhoe for 2.5 months was a big chunk of it. Not all of this is heavy equipment. There is some smaller equipment in there, some grinders, things like that. But for the most part, it was the larger equipment, the stuff that we're after. Projects in the queue. These are projects that we know of and that we're chomping at the bit to get to. At the top of the list, you see sinkholes. Luckily, those are out of the roadway, so we've been able to buy some time with those. Hopefully, with this new mini excavator, those will be the first things on the list. Page everybody's been waiting for. How much is it going to cost? $153,539.75. Sorry? 75. So when we looked at the mini excavator, when we decided that is the piece of equipment that best suit our department, we went out and we found the top three, not the top three manufacturers, but some of the top three. Well, we pulled the three manufacturers out of a hat, I guess. No. We found three manufacturers and went out and did hands-on looks at them. The Caterpillar you see is $113,588. That's kind of the Cadillac of equipment. We knew we weren't going to get that one. The JCB and the John Deere, we got hands-on time, demo time with both of those pieces of equipment. We all liked the Deere a lot better, so we were happy when they came in at the lowest cost. Not only are they lowest cost, but Pape Machinery down in Kent is already on the state contract, so that kind of fast tracks that process. All three come with a standard thumb and bucket, but the three attachments that we are asking for would be a brush cutter for all those blackberries that we just talked about. The BTI compactor, otherwise known as a hoe pack or a jumping jack, is used for compacting 5 to 6 feet depth worth of material. That's really important when you're getting your compacting for roadways. And of course, a BTI breaker, otherwise known as a jackhammer. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, breaking up sidewalk, concrete, asphalt, things of that nature. I don't want to forget or leave off the flatbed trailer. This is a 12,000-pound piece of equipment. So in order to haul that thing around the city, we need something that could take at least 15,000. Excuse me, 15,000 pounds. Excuse me, 15,000 pounds. So that total price, as I said, came out to $153,539.75. As Director Todd had mentioned before, there was the original plan of purchasing 2 switch-and-go trucks. We reduced that plan down to 1 truck with the intent to purchase equipment to supplement that truck. What good is it having all these uses if you can't load the thing, right? The truck came out to about $112,000, which left us a pretty good chunk of budget left for this mini excavator, and whatever's left over will be pulled from the streets fund. I wanted to put this in there just to show you guys that you approved the purchase of the PW14, the switch and go truck, and finally last month we got all of the stuff that we ordered. We got the plow for PW5, we got the plow for the new truck, and all the bodies that we requested. On the right, you can see there's a great shot of our chipper that's only a few years old and the arborist box. The photo on the left shows you that we've actually already put this stuff to use. Having a bucket truck that's not too old with the downrigger set up the way it is, nothing feels better than when you feel safe and you're 40 feet in the air cutting the branch off the tree than having some rigidity underneath you. Then again, working in unison with our other new equipment. Most favorite picture that we've taken or that I've taken to date is big, beautiful PW14 with a 4.8 yard sander on the back and our Western Whiteout XL massive plow on the front. We have a similar one. It's one size smaller for PW5. So hopefully next winter, when we get into that snow season, we can tackle these things easily. I do want to point out that as the city has grown and evolved, so has Public Works, hence all the new equipment that we've asked for. With that, I have to say, our yard's getting kind of small. The city hall parking lot was good or sufficient enough when we were, again, cutting grass and cleaning parks. But as our needs have grown, so have we. So with that, again, that is the piece of equipment with our name on it down there at the Pape Yard. We are anxious to get it. Again, it's a tracked vehicle. We'll need a trailer to go with it. And those 3 attachments that I mentioned. Does anybody have any questions? Please.
What do you think the life expectancy of this piece of equipment would be?
That is a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. We expect this piece of equipment to last up to 20 years.
Perfect. So if we, back of the napkin math, I was figuring you'd say 10 to 15. I was hoping for 15. If we save 10 grand a year in rental fees, we're breaking even. And any time that you use it beyond that is free. It's already paid for because we would have had to rent again and we didn't have to. So Public Works, you're getting a little more expensive, but you're still cheaper than police and fire. And you need equipment to do the job we're asking you to do and to do it efficiently and to do it safely. And I have no problem with this.
Councilmember Steckler.
No question on the equipment. I totally go with your recommendation. I said a couple of questions on the funding of it, just that I understand it.
Sure.
So we saved a certain amount of money from a capital expenditure for one of the 2 trucks, correct?
Yes.
And how much did we save?
About 120 grand.
Okay, so 120 was saved from that. And then the balance was coming from what particular fund was that?
It's coming out of the streets fund. I don't have the line for you, but I can find that. Get that.
Well, I mean, it's coming from the streets fund?
So streets fund is the place that the money goes into. We get some gas tax money that goes in. We also put general fund money into that. And that's where we charge things like a pothole repair. Comes out of that. That's different from a capital project to repave a road.
Right.
Capital fund, but there's money that's in the street fund
Or
that we're
equipment.
not using because we didn't hire somebody to do some of this work that Matthew did instead.
That was my question. So we've saved the money, which will be a savings we would have had at the end of this year, coming out of the second.
We have
year
a
of our
small
biennium.
number of saved money.
But that
but-
will be enough to cover this additional cost on the rig. So
Yeah, that's why Laurel says, no problem, we got enough money.
no
for
money,
this."
no
So-
problem coming out at the end of the year on your line.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Item. Okay.
Thanks.
The majority of it will be coming out of equipment reserve, and then the small amount that we'll need, I think it's around 20,000, will be coming out of streets.
Thank you. Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation, Matthew. Thank you. I think one of the directives that this council gave, at least every time that I've been up here, is to let's just get the equipment. I know there's a need, and I know you guys have done your due diligence here, that you've decided that we don't need the second truck. I'm going to trust that. I think makes sense what you're doing here. Councilmember Bond just did the math. And if I could make a secondary motion to just say something later on, that I'm happy to take ARPA funds and buy a public workshop tomorrow or the land. I know there's a need. We have grown out of our space here exponentially. I think we've known that for at least 8-10 years now. And hopefully we can have that conversation at a sooner rather than later date as well. But I support this.
Any other questions? There are no questions. Is there any motion?
What's the next?
640. Resolution 2022-640.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd make a motion to approve resolution 2022-640, authorizing the city manager to purchase a new John Deere mini excavator and flat deck trailer combined in an amount not to exceed $155,000 pursuant to the city of Mill Creek's purchasing policies.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The resolution is passed 4-0. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, brings us to our consent agenda this evening. Item F, approval of checks number 64471 through 64546 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $1,334,844.96. Audit committee was Councilmember Cavallari, pinch hitting for Councilmember Allison and Councilmember Bond. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exception.
And item G, payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $258,962.62. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions.
And item H, city council meeting minutes of January 25th, 2022 and February 1st, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Consent agenda is approved 4-0. Okay, reports, given that we're down in numbers, I'll keep mine brief. We had the county executive reconvene the Housing Affordability Regional Task Force. We had our first meeting today, which was facilitated by Andrew Ballard. It was more of a recap of where we've been, and we will be reconvening on June 2nd, but there was some interesting statistics that I will forward to be part of the packet next week, so we can talk about it a little bit more. I think that's all I had for tonight. Councilmember Bond, any report tonight?
No report.
Councilmember Steckler.
Acting city manager, are you going to be addressing update on city manager search?
We weren't planning this, Councilman.
It's going to be part of the agenda for next week.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You want to give a quick update as to what activity happened last week?
Sure. Do you see?
I just think as the only member of the search committee in attendance, I was just going to give a quick update that we are moving ahead with the new city manager search. Interviews were held with the search firm last week with council members and city employees. They are in the process of putting together the full packet for us for review at next week's meeting. Just wanted to give that update. And also a request, as we have now finished the first quarter. I know that our finance director is going to start working on the first quarter recap. I also wanted to request if we could get a budget to date expense recap with that as well, just to see how we're tracking against the rest of the year. That was it for me.
Councilmember Cavallari, any report tonight?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I had the Mayor Pro Tem, when we were rifling through our goals and objectives for projects and events this year, she mentioned the run of the mill. And so I had been playing phone tag and email tag with Mr. Knox for probably the past 3 weeks since that conversation. And we seem to have settled on the date as long as the city can acquiesce. And I really had no idea of the legwork that went into this of needing to get all the coaches, all the run teams, all the staffing, all the you parents, you name it, that goes into this here to have them compete and have them put this event on. They settled on July 23rd, which is the fourth Saturday, and are simply would await a green light from the city to hold this event. So if we can have a representative city manager somehow get back to Mr. Knox and give them a thumbs up or thumbs down, I think it would allow a lot of them to, first of all, we've been screaming for events, but allow them to breathe a sigh of relief that the date is good and everybody can start planning accordingly. And lastly is I don't think I need to get too far into it, but we know we lost another local police officer recently here in our community. That makes 3 in 9 days. And I think no one here ever underestimates the job and the length that these brave men and women do every day, in and out, no questions asked. Enough's been said about it. And I think enough tears have been cried about it. I just want to thank our men and women that wear the uniform every day, that we appreciate and thank them. And the very banner that flies above us is because of them. Thank you.
Acting City Manager, your reports tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. Council. Before I get into 2 reports that I have, I'll touch on what Councilmember Steckler, your update on the city manager search. I'll just bring up 2 dates that are kind of key at this point. April 15th is when that will start sending out those proposals or the request for applications. The 9th, I believe, is the date that those are set to come back in, or the deadline for those. So those are some key dates that we know of now. We'll get a more full report, as I mentioned earlier.
And Martin, on our agenda next week, we'll be discussing what is going out. I'm trying to remember not the circular, but the
The
Project
recruitment
recruitment
brochure.
Yeah, the recruitment brochure is going to be part of our agenda next week for us to review and discuss.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Will we be having weekly updates starting next week
Yeah,
from?
yes,
the
we
search
will.
firm?
I'll check into that. Yes.
Okay.
Now I was going to mention one thing about Councilmember Cavallari. You had mentioned about the event, and I actually forgot what I was going to mention. But I'll go on to the two reports that I have. The first one is regarding the University of Washington Bothell. They approached us requesting to work with one of their classes, a project consulting team. In their business program, they have a higher level class, which is taught by one of the professors that we are familiar with. And this is a business consulting class, Business 491. Every year, and this year it's spring, they get their class and they put together a groups of, I think it's about 4 to 6 team members. These teams collaborate with local community organizations, companies, both private and public sector. And a lot of examples are current in the past are Amazon, the Daily Herald, Training Institute, Home STEM Network. Those are some of the examples. One of them this year is, of course, the city of Mill Creek. So we are working with a team from UW Bothell. This team is working with us in this spring quarter. The project will go all the way through June 9th, at which time they'll provide us with some deliverables, an executive summary, and a presentation. We've met the team members for the first time, and their average GPA is about a 3.7. So it's some of the brightest kids coming out of that program. Their backgrounds in business span multiple disciplines, including accounting, finance, general business, and marketing. So a little bit about the scope. We approached them and mentioned that they could work on a project that we're well familiar with, DRCC, the Dobson Remillard Church Cook properties. So we reached out to them and decided to make our recommendations, to ask them to provide us with proposed recommendations on the most feasible, best use of the property. So we give them some ideas on what they could do. We provided the paperwork and the documentation from our recent retreat, which revealed a number of different ideas that we had, including the community center, Boys and Girls Club, Performing Arts Center, and the natural spaces and ballparks. And we also said that they can expand, and if they had any new ideas, that they can bring those to us as well. Director Todd had an opportunity to take them and show them the property last night. And so they have some idea, but keeping in mind that they will, that's the extent of their land use considerations. They're not going to take into consideration anything other than it's a 15-acre parcel or parcels that they're going to advise on. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Just a quick question, quick comment, sorry. I love this idea. I think we've talked about this and we've never really pulled the trigger, whether it's having interns or those still in school come here, work on projects, work within projects, work with the city staff. I love the idea. I think it's fantastic. I think it's inclusive, thinking out of the box. This is the highlight for this meeting for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other reports?
One more report regarding the complete streets. The Transportation Improvement Board Complete Streets project, including the crosswalk between the fields at Jackson High School, is substantially complete. I'm just giving you a report this week that we will have a project closeout presentation next week by our city engineer, Frank Reinhardt. We believe that when we say substantially, we went out, actually Director Todd went out there and they're pretty much done. You check the lights?
Didn't push the button on the lights, did you? They work.
So the lights work. So it's complete. So we're good to go on that one.
Might have some pictures and some updates next week.
Yeah, with that, we'll take any questions.
I'm sure the mayor pro tem will sleep well tonight.
Yes, you will.
Quick question, Martin, were we going to be getting a recap on the retreat that we did? I hadn't seen any documentation or anything come back from that.
That was on a list to talk with the mayor pro tem on the weekly, kind of the next steps on the retreat. So
I think it came in from Andrew on Friday after our meeting, so we'll go over it Thursday and include it in the packet next week.
Okay.
Yeah, it came that following Friday.
Is that the reports for this evening?
That's the end of the reports, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, we do not have an executive session on the agenda, so we'll end with audience communication. Would anyone like to address the council before we adjourn? There's no one in the audience here. I'm not seeing any hands or hearing anyone say they want to speak. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 7:30 and reconvene a week from tonight. Thank you, everyone.